Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. For those of you joining me the first time, I'm Melissa Reed. I'm a mixed media artist, and today I am working on a 6x12 cradled board. I usually order these off of Amazon. There is a link to those in the description of my video, as well as some of my regularly used items. I am going in today to do another piece of my spherical kind of mixed media pieces. I wanted to do the background in just shades of blue and green. So I've got three different shades there that I'm going to be using. I'm going to have a list of all of the colors that I've used in the description of my video. And what I'm doing is creating a gradation on the board. Now I am going in on a raw wooden board there. I shouldn't say typically, most of the time I guess, I use gesso as a primer on those. Although I didn't on my last piece in last week's video, and I liked the way I could still kind of see a little bit of the wood grain coming through there. So I decided to do the same thing today and go in without using the gesso. One benefit of gessoing is it does change the way that the board accepts the paint. It soaks in a little more if you don't have it primed, but again, I kind of like that effect, so that's the way I'm doing this one. I'm using a variety of brushes here to blend. That's just a 2-inch flat brush there, and the round brush is called a mop. A lot of you have asked me about it. I don't have a link for it, but I did purchase it at Michael's. But the brush itself is called a mop brush. It's a good blending brush. So you can probably find one of those on Amazon or at your local Michael's, wherever you typically buy your art supplies. So I'm going in and just creating that nice gradation on the background there, blending. I'm adding a little more paint here and there, really just to get a nice, soft blue-green background that I really find very pleasing to the eye. And once I have that background down and I've let that completely dry, I have some turquoise acrylic ink there that I'm using on a roller to put on with my text stamp. Now, initially, I wanted to have my own handwriting in the background. I was kind of hoping for a little bit of larger handwriting, but my writing is absolutely atrocious, and I kind of just realized that the stamp is probably going to be the way to go with this. So I have that on there. It is slightly lighter and different than all of the different types of paint that I have on there, so it shows up really well, as you can see here, and you can see it without it being obnoxiously bright. It blends in well with those background colors. So I went ahead and measured. I'm putting 3 circles on there. So I went ahead and measured out to what I wanted. Each of the circles is 3 inches in diameter, which I got set up there and did that in pencil. And I'm going to go in after I have all of that done, and with a darker shade of blue, I'm going to then fill in the background of all of those circles. Now, they are not going to remain a solid blue. Actually, I mixed some raw umber in with that because I wanted to get just a slightly darker blue. What I'm doing is just creating a dark background so that when I put other colors of paint on top of it, it almost creates its own shadows, if I'm doing a good job of explaining that there. So I'm just going around with a little flat brush. I think that's a 1/2-inch flat brush there, and just really going around that circle and filling everything in. It does not have to be perfect because this is all going to be painted over with more layers of paint in the next couple of steps. This is just the very first layer, again, to create a very dark background so that when bits of the next few layers are laid down and then removed, you're going to be able to see some of that darkness coming through. For those of you who have watched my other videos and who've been with me for a while, you know that I am typically an intuitive painter, and that means that I don't enter a project with too much of an idea in mind. Sometimes I have a little bit of an idea, as I did in this one here. I knew I wanted to have a piece with 3 circles on it. I just didn't know exactly what it was going to look like. So as I am putting this layer down, I'm starting to look at the piece and let it tell me what I'm going to do next. So I want to go in and put some lighter layers down on that. And again, I am not doing this in any sort of special order or any special way. I'm just laying some lighter colors down, and once I get those all laid down, I'm going to use the water spray technique to start creating a little bit of texture in these spherical shapes. And I'm going to do that process over and over again with several different colors. You can already see there on that top one how some of the dark blue is still coming through. When I spray that water down on there and lay my shop towel down, it instantly creates this really cool texture that I really love. And when I further lay even more coats of paint down there and do that same technique over top of it, it really creates an intricate kind of texture pattern. So I used that in my last video a little bit, and I'm doing it again in this one because I like the way that it turns out. I'm doing the colors slightly different in each sphere, not obviously different, just enough. I'm using the same background colors in each one so that it makes visual sense, but just so that they're not all exactly identical, because I don't really want that for this piece. You know, it's kind of funny because after I'm sitting here voicing over this video and the piece has been finished and I know how it looks now at the end, and it really doesn't look the way that it's looking right now. And that's kind of what I was talking about as far as being an intuitive artist. Even still at this point, as I'm in the middle of it, I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. And for me and for the type of art that I create, that is half of the fun. I will start a piece and let it tell me what I need to do next. So I never really exactly know how the outcome is going to look. I think that says a lot about maybe my attention span, I guess, because it really does keep me engaged that way. I would tend to get bored if I have a piece and I have it planned down to the T. I kind of like the surprise and the not knowing what it's going to look like. And it will sometimes bring about visual problems that I then have to brainstorm and figure out how to solve in the moment. And that keeps me sharp as an artist, I find. I really like doing that. It always creates new challenges for myself in a way that I might not be able to do so otherwise. But I mean, to each his own. I know that kind of creating is not for everybody, and I totally respect that. That there is something just absolutely magical to me about someone who can sit down with a full plan in their head and see it through from beginning to end. That just really isn't how I work. It never really was. When I was in art school, it used to drive my professors crazy because you were always expected to keep a sketchbook full of your ideas and your plans for your projects, and I just really never worked that way. So anything I put in those books was always sort of just forced and there because I needed to have something on the pages. But I would just much rather start creating a piece and see what happens and work from there. So I've got some of those layers down there, and I decided that it was all looking a little bit too dark, and I knew I wanted to add some brightness to it. So I have some Liquitex Florescent Orange and Florescent Pink down there, and I'm going to go back and forth, still creating more of those textured layers with the water sprays, and just bringing a little bit of brightness out there. I'm using that mop brush, the blending brush that I have there, just to spread that brightness around. Now, because I have those water droplet textures underneath, you can still see some of those layers popping through. And like I said before, it's creating its own shading and shadows and different values on there, which is something that I really like. But they do look much better brightened up. In my opinion, though, those other steps were definitely necessary so that I could get those different values popping through underneath. And I'm just going through and creating more layers of brightness now on top of those darker tones. And I will keep doing this for the next several steps until I am pleased with the balance I have of the light and dark going on the board there. I'll bring you in a little bit closer here. I'm using a much smaller brush there. I wish I could be more specific on these brushes. The fact of the matter is that I went to art school for my degree 25 years ago. So I've had a lot of these brushes that whole time. I don't remember where I got them or what they even are. If they're not marked on them, a lot of them have the writing rubbed off, or the paint is starting to chip off where the names of them were. So, like, I'll do my best telling you when I can, because I definitely would love to share all of that information with you, but sometimes I just don't have it. This guy is a very small, very stiff bristled brush, and I chose it because I want to get some smaller areas of color in there. You can see how I have that going on there with that fluorescent pink color. Using the bigger brush was just getting to be a little cumbersome. It was laying down too much color in spots I didn't necessarily want it. So this way I can control where it's going and then go in and blend it out from there, so it is creating a little bit more of the highlights that I want to have going on. So while I used different colors in each of the three spheres for the underneath layers, I'm using a lot of the same colors for the highlight layers on the top, and that's creating a little bit of visual harmony there and bringing all three of them together. Just one of many ways that you can do that in a piece. And don't be afraid. Like you could see there, I was wiping away. I do not have nearly as steady of a hand as it looks like I do in these videos. I'm bracing on a lot of things a lot of time, but I go outside of the lines that I want sometimes, and as long as you catch it when it's still wet, you can very easily just wipe up anything that you perceive as a little accident on your canvas there. So I'm starting to think about how I might want to finish the piece, and I've got an idea in my head. Don't know for sure if it's what I'm going to do. Actually, I've got several ideas in my head, and that sometimes that becomes the problem. Usually at that point when I can't figure out where I want to go next, that is a point where I will stop for the day, or at least for a few hours, and not think about it, not look at it. And when I come back with a fresh set of eyes, it becomes easier than to maybe see something that I feel like the piece is lacking, or see a direction that I might want to go. As I'm doing these layers, they're drying quickly enough that I can then immediately go back in with even further layers of brightness, and I'm just building up, just like I was building up the shadows and the dark tones on the underneath. I'm going in now and building up the highlights and the bright spots that I want to be seen on top. I love these fluorescent colors. I use them pretty frequently in my work. There's just something about the saturation of color and the intensity in them that is just great. So when I did wake up this morning, I decided to go in and do some line work. I did this in another piece last year. You may or may not remember. I can put that piece up at the end for you if you want to take a look at it. I'll put it in my tiles at the end of the video. And I'm just going in with a micron pen and making these fine lines that connect each and every place on the surface there. And when I'm done doing that, I'm going to go back in and darken up some of those lines and put some thickness at the intersection of those lines, kind of like with neurographic drawing, if you're familiar with that concept. I'm going to skip the majority of that process. I'll show you the very beginning of it here, but then I'm going to just finish that, and I'll come back with you when all of the thicker lines and intersecting pieces have been finished. Okay, so all of the lines have been darkened up like I want them, and then I decided I wanted to do some metallic leaf inside the spheres. The copper leafing is something that I've used in my work many times before. If you saw the very large piece that I did for a gallery juried exhibit piece that I was working on last year, you will remember that I used some copper leaf in with the sphere shapes with that. And with the background being the beautiful blue and green tones, the copper is going to look really nice in contrast to that. So I'm laying down a little bit of metal leaf adhesive there. I just put a little bit on a paper plate and I'm using a brush to lay it down. Now this is a brush that I do typically paint with. As long as you are cleaning that brush out immediately after you're done, don't let that set up at all. It'll be very difficult to get out and you'll ruin the brush, but it's totally fine to use that. I've got my leaf there that I'm just laying down. The wonderful and also frustrating thing about the metal leaf is it's going to go wherever it goes and it will stick wherever you have the adhesive. So I don't have to be too precise where I'm laying it down, because if I brush any of those crumbs over, it's going to land anywhere that I have the leaf adhesive down. So I'm just laying that down there, and I have a very stiff bristled brush that I'm using to brush away any of the excess. And then I thought some of the parts looked maybe a little too full and shiny, so I got a piece of 100 grit sandpaper out there, and I found that if I spray the areas first with a little bit of water, it's giving me exactly the kind of look that I want there. It's not taking away too much, but it's taking away just enough, and I can control almost shading with it, as far as the removal of the brightness to create some of those darker areas. And then I just went in and touched up a couple little spots that removed some of the paint underneath, and I'm going to show you how it looks at the end. And here's the finished piece for you. I coated that with a spray of Krylon Triple Thick Spray. That's typically what I use on most of my pieces at the end. And I hope you enjoyed this process. I will have this piece up for sale on my Etsy shop. There are links to my Etsy, my Instagram, and my Facebook business page in the description of this video. If you are interested, please go ahead and take a look at those. I appreciate each and every one of you. If you liked my video, please give it a thumbs up and share it out to get it to as many people as possible. Also, if you haven't had a chance to subscribe yet, go ahead and hit that button. I put out a new video every single Friday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, and I look forward to seeing you back here again next week. Thank you so much and have a great day.